died from lack of it, and great kingdoms have fallen because they taxed it. This morning we are talking about the amazing salt. What's funny about salt is we go and buy it and it's nothing, isn't it? There was not a Morton Salt Company that delivered in these little perfectly, round things that we get all of our salt from every day. When Jesus was talking about it back in the New Testament, and what we're going to be talking about this morning is Matthew 5:13, when Jesus is addressing the idea of salt and calling us the salt of the earth, it had a completely different meaning. And we're going to get into that this morning, and we're going to get into what does that mean to our lives. What does it mean to be the salt of the earth? Here's Matthew 5:13. It says, "You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the salt of the earth." And again, to our ears, that means something completely different than what it meant to people when Jesus said it. What he was saying, believe it or not, in saying you are the salt of the earth, he was saying you are unbelievably valuable. Back in the day, men used to load up their camels, ride all the way across the desert, and exchange salt, ounce for ounce, with gold. That's how valuable salt was. Jesus was literally saying, you're as valuable as the most valuable commodity that we have here on this planet at the time. Now, he could have said, you're as valuable as gold, but as we're going to see here in a little bit, salt was actually more important than gold. To call them the salt of the earth was a higher compliment to saying, you guys are gold. You're golden. You're the golden kids. He was saying something much greater than that. But to give you an idea about how valuable salt was, Ethiopians pressed it into coins and literally made it into their currency. The way that we pressed out gold and silver and things like that in our early years, the Ethiopians literally would press salt into round objects, and it was their currency. The Roman army received their wages as salt. The Roman term for salt was sal, S-A-L. Today, we have expanded on that word a little bit, and it's salary. Salt was incredibly valuable. They used to trade slaves for salt. And that's how we got the phrase, he's worth his salt. All this started from somewhere. And what Jesus was saying is you guys are golden. You guys are as valuable as anything on this planet. I want to throw in a sidebar here real quick. Don't let other people define you. Don't let other people tell you how important and how significant you are in life. Because you know what's incredible about people? It's just like the weather. People change. One day you're just, and I see this all the time with my 6th grade daughter. From 5th to 6th grade, man, she was loved one moment, hated the next. She loved this person one moment, couldn't stand them. Just up and down and up and down. But we all have people like that in our lives. And some of us are crazy enough to listen to what they say about us. And we actually are letting other people define us. I want to encourage you today, let God define your value. Because he's saying here, you are the single most important thing. The most important commodity on this entire planet. He's saying you are so significant, you are so valuable. Matter of fact, he even took it to the point of saying, you're valuable enough that I would give my own son for you. That's how significant. That's how valuable you are. So, he's saying we're golden. What else is he saying? He's also saying this. He's saying that you are profoundly and supremely essential to this earth. You know how your doctors are always telling you, hey, cut back on the salt. Not good for you. Anybody ever heard that from a doctor? There are a couple here. Okay, we got a lot here from their doctors saying cut back on salt. Guess what? Don't cut back too far on your salt. Guess what happens if you don't have any salt intake? You will die. You, like every other organism on this planet, without salt intake, you're not going to make it. Salt is absolutely essential. It's even essential for the plants. Without salt, we would be living on a dead, barren planet. And let me translate that for you, for us today. Being Christians and being called the salt of the earth. If you were to remove us from the planet, you would have a planet full of, and let me explain what I mean by us. God's influence on earth is grace, is mercy, is peace, is love, is goodness. And guess who He has chosen to use as instruments to disperse that grace, that mercy, that peace, that goodness? It's us. We're His tool. We're here for His purposes to basically spread Him to the earth. If you were to remove us, remove the presence of the good, of the mercy, of the kindness, this planet would become a barren place to live. Welcome back, guys. Did you enjoy your time out? We're talking about salt this morning, by the way. But without the influence that God exerts on this planet through us, this planet would be one big ball of selfishness, malice, hatred, anger. This earth would become a wasteland the same way that the soil would become a wasteland without salt. The same way that no life can be sustained eventually. I mean, quite frankly, with the advent of the atomic bomb, boom, it would be over anyway. Because you wouldn't have any good restraining people's greed, power, and malice. So God's saying, not only are you incredibly valuable by saying you're the salt of the earth, He's saying you're absolutely essential for the earth to continue. You're absolutely essential for life to continue. But He's saying not only are you valuable and essential, you're also incredibly beneficial. Did you know that there are over 14,000 uses of salt? That was a shocker for me when I found 14,000 uses of salt. And I'm just going to cover a couple of them because, you know, we could run a little long if I tried to cover them all. So thankfully, we're just going to cover a few of them. First, salt adds flavor to life. See, there we go. I was reading my notes backwards. I knew I was in trouble somewhere. That's what it is. I'm going backwards. Salt adds flavor to life. I want you to think about this. What's life without love? What would life be like without love? What would life be like without joy? Without peace? Be kind of a bland, icky tasting. Couldn't leave a nasty taste in your mouth, wouldn't it? Part of our job is to add flavor to life. Through the influence of God in us, we should be adding love. We should be adding joy to people's life. Peace, kindness, goodness. We're supposed to be making things better. The question we need to ask ourselves, are we making people's lives better? Because you're in people's lives, are their lives better? We're going to have a lot of questions this morning for you guys to mentally answer. Are you making things better where you're at? Salt also preserves. Before there was refrigeration, salt was the king of preservation. You salted your meat, otherwise it went bad quickly. You'd salt pretty much everything. Everything would be preserved when you rubbed it really good and solid with salt. Now, not indefinitely, but it would do its work. Do you preserve the good around you? Do you preserve the innocence? Do you preserve and protect and cover hearts? That's our job. We're salt. You are the salt of the earth. Salt is also a purifier. It purifies. Is your influence such that when you're around, people are cleaning up their act a little bit because they know that you're there? I mean, there are some people, I know, I'm a pastor, there are some people that are going to be raucous and rowdy and ready, whatever. In fact, they take pride in how, nasty they can be. But we should be a purifying agent. God in us should make some people go, ooh, I better watch that word right there. I better not, make that lewd comment to the person next to me. Salt should be a purifying agent. Are we purifying agents? Salt also removes bitterness. This one I love. I found this out this week. This has been a whole revelation for me. I make tea. And I'm trying to lose weight. But the only way for me to be able to drink my tea is to put at least 2 cups of sugar, probably as close to 2 cups of sugar, 2 big giant teaspoonfuls or tablespoonfuls of sugar in my tea, and then dump the milk in it, because the milk somehow makes the sugar magically get into the solution so I can taste it. Otherwise, you just dump the sugar and it just sits in the bottom. You want to be able to taste your sugar. Well, for the life of me, I couldn't figure out, how does Lipton and all these other guys do it with these instant tea mixes? I thought they're cheating. I finally found out this week. You know what they do? You just take a little pinch of salt. That's exactly right. A little pinch of salt, throw it in there, and bam! All you need is 1 teaspoon of sugar, and it tastes exactly like the Lipton tea instant stuff. I was like, whoa! Revelation! And what it was, see, I gain things when I study for my sermons, don't I? What it is it just takes away the bitterness. And it'll do the same thing in coffee. I had trouble with coffee, and I threw a little salt in it, and poof, magically, I didn't get that. Every time I tasted coffee, it gives me a headache though, so I'm back to tea. I'm not going to come in here too wired too often. Too wired. But it takes, it just like pulls off the edge of the bitterness so that the sugar works and everything works. And I was just so excited this week. And I've been drinking tea and coffee a little looser than I ought to, just because I found this out. I had to experiment and make absolutely sure. But here's the question that we have for ourselves. When you come into a situation, do you help remove bitterness? So many times I walk into people's lives at tough times. And one of the things that I feel like is my God-given duty to fight is bitterness. You've met people that have been hurt and they haven't talked to someone for 40 years, 50 years. The person's on deathbed, and you're trying to talk them into going in to see them. And you realize somewhere in the process, man, bitterness has the worst effect on the person that's holding on to the hurt. The person that they're bitter towards isn't destroying them, it's destroying the person that's holding on to the bitterness. So whenever I'm in that situation, I'm not trying to save the relationship, I'm really trying to save that person. We, as entities, should be out there in people's lives trying to hold down the bitterness. That's part of our responsibility. That's part of who we are. And one thing that we should never be, and I just want to throw this out, you should never be bitter as a child of God. Never! We've covered that in our messages on forgiveness. Jesus said, you got to forgive the way I forgave. We've already talked about the price that he had to pay. There's no price too big. We just forgive. And Lord willing, through doing that, we can teach other people and we can just help eliminate bitterness. We got to remove bitterness. And finally, salt brings healing. I'm sure that there are a few of you, when you were growing up, what did you do to a sore throat? How did you treat a sore throat? You gargle warm salt water. Every time. Salt, in that whole purifying, sanitizing thing, also heals and helps bring about healing in things. You get a cut on your foot, you can soak it in salt water, and it's good for it. It's part of our job. You're the salt of the earth. You should be bringing healing in people's lives. And I just want to emphasize this one more time. You should never be the problem. When you walk through the door, a piece of the solution should always be walking in. Because it's Christ in you, the hope of glory. You need to be bringing in healing. The question is, are you a safe and a pure place for people to come and recover? Because really what a lot of people are walking through the door that are hurt and beaten and busted, they just need a place, a safe place, a loving place to come and be wrapped up and just heal for a while. Are you that for other people? That's who we're supposed to be. And now I'm going to talk about a byproduct of salt. Salt makes people thirsty. If you have a lot of salt in something like salty potato chips, you're always reaching for something to drink, aren't you? I know I love the salty, but I'm constantly drinking when I do it. Our lives are supposed to create a thirst in the people around us. Our lives are supposed to create a thirst for God, the living water of Jesus Christ. That's what we're supposed to generate when people are around us. Now, I want to say this also because I've seen people do this so strangely wrong. There is a difference between being salty and adding savor and flavor, and being salty where you dump too much on something. What happens when you dump too much salt on something? It sounds like, and they're reaching for water, but it's not, to calm a thirst. It's to get rid of that taste in their mouth. Don't kill people with things. You're supposed to add a flavor and a savor in people's lives. I thought about that. I thought maybe one of the issues that we have in our church and in our country is that we're trying to get people that don't know Christ into church and surrounding them with all this salt. And sometimes maybe it's just too much. Maybe, as Jesus said, we're the salt of the earth. We ought to be going out into the world with a savor and a flavor and gently causing thirst in people. I mean, do people ask you, hey, wow, you made it through X, Y, Z, and look at you. How did you do that? Do they look at you and say, wow, man, I've been watching you. You've got your act together. How are you doing that? There was a guy I knew a few years back. I still know him, but he was a pastor's husband, of all things. He was a co-pastor at a church. But he had a job that he earned his living with, and he was a manager. And he was in training one day with some folks that were moving into a position, And he finished the first day and spent, just one day with these guys. And a guy came up afterwards and he says, dude, I don't know what all the questions are, but I know you have the answers. Do things like that happen for you? They ought to be happening for us. We ought to be pulling ourselves together. We ought to be salty people. Okay. Jesus goes on from there. And he says, but what if the salt loses its saltiness? Now, for those of you that are chemists here, you can tell me later, and I get it. Salt cannot lose its saltiness. But they didn't have a Morton Salt Company back at that particular time. What they would do is they'd go out into the quarries and into the mines, and they would mine out the salt. But if the salt had too much dirt content in it, if it had too much junk in the salt, it was considered not to be good salt. So if salt got too much dirt in it, it was considered to have lost its saltiness. That's what was meant by that phrase. In the same way, if you just dump pure salt in your mouth and you go, bleh, bleh, bleh. If you were to dump salt that had so much dirt that you couldn't taste the salt, once again you'd be going, bleh, bleh, bleh. But for a completely different reason. You'd be spitting it out of your mouth, right? You want to get rid of it. Salt with too much junk in it is not palatable. And Jesus says it's not good for anything but to be thrown out. What they would do with salt that was too dirty, that wasn't usable, they'd take it and they would throw it out in front of their house, and they would make a walkway out to the road. It would serve to make a hard walking surface so that they could walk out to the road with it. That was the common practice back then. And Jesus is saying, if you got too much dirt in you, you go from 14,000 uses to one, to being a walkway. And not only that, you go from being profoundly invaluable, more valuable than gold, to being worthless and thrown out. And the question that leaves us with is, do we have too much dirt in our lives? Are we pure enough? You are the salt of the earth. Are you pure enough? Do you make people go, blah, because there's too much dirt? Or do you make them thirsty? Do you savor their lives? Do you add spice just enough? They're like, wow, that's really good. I'm not even sure what that is, but wow, that's amazing. I like that person, or that person has got something I need. Are we making people thirsty for Jesus Christ? And one more thing that happens when you have too much dirt in you, instead of bringing healing, you actually bring the disease. So, the question we have to ask ourselves is, where are we today? Are we the salt of the earth? Because that's what Jesus is trying to tell us. That's our job. That's our role. That's our responsibility. We are the salt of the earth. So are you? Are you the agent of healing and cleansing and restoration? Do you cause people to hunger and thirst for more of God with your life? Do other people find you invaluable to their lives? Are you the salt of the earth? If you're not the salt of the earth, guys, you have one thing that you need to do. If you're not the salt of the earth, there's one thing that you need to do. There's only one thing that can really interfere with this. When you ask Christ into your life, there's only one thing that will keep you from being salty, as it were. Too much dirt. So if you look at your life and you evaluate, you're like, ooh, I'm not quite the salt of the earth that I'm supposed to be. then you have one responsibility. Clean it up. And the funny thing is, I wish I could tell you this morning, oh, that's an easy job. Go get it done. It's so hard we can't even do it. What you have to do is you have to go and ask God, God, you see me? You know what's going on. Can you please come and clean this up? I want to do what you want me to do. I want to be who you want me to be. But as of right now, I'm just not there yet. Just ask. He says, ask and you will receive. There are some things, people say, well, I'm asking, I'm not sure about the will of the Lord on this. This is God's will for you. Okay? That you follow Him, that you run after Him with purity and vitality in your Christian life. Ask Him. He will clean you up. So here's our challenge. As a group of people, here is what I would like for us to make our goal in lives. Or as a church, I guess, really, is to be supremely valuable as a group of people. I want folks that others can't live without. I want us to be useful. I want us to be essential to our communities and to our friends and to our the people that we're working with. The people in our lives, I want us to be essential. That's who Jesus was. I want us to be world changers for the good. Can we do that? We're little. But man, Jesus started with just 12. I'm thinking we could do amazing things if we allow God to get rid of us and fill it up with Him.